morning students. Today we will study the chapter of enzyme inhibition. First of all, you should know what is the process of enzyme inhibition. In enzyme inhibition, there is a reduction in the rate of enzyme catalyzed reaction. That means when the inhibitors will be present during the rate of reaction, they will inhibit the rate and there will be no formation of products. So with this definition, we are very much clear that inhibitors are those substances which decrease the rate of enzyme catalyzed reaction. So enzyme inhibitors, they are of two types, specific and non-specific. Among non-specific agents, we have some chemicals which cause the denaturation, as well as when we apply heat or rising temperature to that enzyme catalyzed reaction, then also there is a deformation or denaturation, the structure breaks and enzyme becomes totally inactive. That is a non-specific way of enzyme inhibition. Coming to the specific type of enzyme inhibition, we have two types, reversible and irreversible. In reversible inhibition, enzyme when react with the substrate, like we have here all the reactions are reversible. That means again they can get back to the initial stage. But in irreversible like this, there is no coming back to the initial stage. We will discuss that later on. So reversible inhibition is further of three types: competitive, non-competitive and uncompetitive inhibition. So we will discuss all these one by one. So first of all, coming to the specific type of inhibition, which is reversible, and we are talking about the reversible inhibition here. This is the example, first example, that is competitive inhibition, in which substrate and enzyme, they have the same shape and structure. So inhibitor tries to compete with the substrate for the active site of the enzyme, so that there is no product formation. As we can very well see from this diagram, see the shape of the active site of the enzyme. The substrate is having the same shape, the inhibitor is also having the same shape. So inhibitor here is competing with the substrate for the active site. So we have taken the example of para-aminobenzoic acid. When it reacts with folate synthetase, which is an enzyme required for the formation of folic acid. But what happens here is the inhibitor, which are our sulfonamides or sulfa drugs, they compete with this folate synthetase enzyme and they compete with the active site, so that they form a complex like this, which is as same as the substrate. So, but in inhibitor and enzyme substrate complex, there is no product formation, so no folic acid formation. We can see from this diagram also, enzyme plus substrate, when both of them react, they form a enzyme substrate complex, product is formed, enzyme is released free. But when inhibitor comes, because it is having the similar shape with the substrate, it also competes and reacts with enzyme and it forms a enzyme inhibitor complex. So this is a competitive inhibition, where there is a competition between these two for the substrate. This is the active site of substrate, where the enzyme will bind and form the enzyme substrate complex and the product. So here there is a competition. But in non-competitive inhibition, you can very well see from this reaction that enzyme and substrate, when they react with the inhibitor, they form the enzyme inhibitor complex and the substrate is released free. And similarly, we have enzyme, that means inhibitor can either react with the enzyme or it can react with the enzyme substrate complex to form the product. So this is a non-competitive. The inhibitor is not competing with the substrate. That's why it is called as non-competitive. Here the inhibitor is competing with the substrate for the active site. But here there is no competition. Inhibitor is individually reacting with the enzyme and either it can react with the enzyme or it can react with the enzyme substrate complex. So no competition. The example here is chelation of calcium and magnesium ions by EDTA to form the product. Now the third type is uncompetitive inhibition. Here enzyme when reacting with the substrate, inhibitor comes, ESI is formed but there is no formation of product and no free enzyme is released. So it is uncompetitive. No product is formed, so no competition. So second type, this was the three types of reversible competition, that is non-competitive, this one, competitive, this one, and uncompetitive, this one. The second type is irreversible competition, like this. Here enzyme and inhibitor, they form a very strong covalent bond. That's why it is called irreversible. That covalent bond cannot be broken. This bond cannot be broken because it is a very strong bond. So here will strong, and that's why it is called undissociated. It will not break. So example is inhibition of acetylcholine esterase by the poisonous gas, which will cause the death of person because this poisonous gas will bind irreversible to this enzyme acetylcholine esterase and it leads to the death of person. So thank you so much for listening carefully.